Sarah had never been given a choice in her life. Not when her parents died, and she was handed off to distant relatives who resented her existence. Not when those relatives traded her to the Blackwood Pack in exchange for hunting rights. Not when the Pack Alpha decided she would serve in his household, scrubbing floors and emptying chamber pots until her hands cracked and bled. Omegas didn't get choices. Omegas got orders. So when the Lycan king himself stood before her and said, "I'm giving you a choice," Sarah was certain she had misheard him. It had started that morning with the Alpha's announcement that the king would be passing through their territory. The entire pack had erupted into chaos, cleaning, cooking, preparing for a visitor more powerful than any of them could comprehend. Sarah had been assigned to serve at the welcome feast, instructed to keep her head down and her mouth shut. She was good at both. The great hall was grander than anything Sarah usually saw. As a kitchen servant, she spent her days in the back rooms, among the smoke and grease and heat. The front of the house, with its tapestries and chandeliers and polished floors, might as well have been another world. She took her position along the wall with the other servants, eyes fixed on the stone floor, hands clasped in front of her. The nobles filed in, laughing and preening. Then silence fell, heavy and absolute. The king had arrived. Sarah didn't look up, didn't need to. She could feel his presence like a physical force, power radiating outward in waves that made her wolf whimper and press flat against her consciousness. He was ancient, vast, more than any single person should be. The feast began. Sarah moved on autopilot, refilling goblets and clearing plates, making herself as invisible as possible. It was a skill she'd honed over years of survival. Be small, be silent, be nothing. It worked. For hours, no one noticed her. Until she reached the high table. She was clearing a platter of bones when she felt it. A weight, a focus, a heat that prickled along her skin. Someone was watching her. Not through her, the way nobles usually looked at servants, at her. She made the mistake of glancing up. The Lycan king sat at the center of the table, and his eyes were fixed directly on her face. He was devastating. That was the only word for it. Dark hair fell past his shoulders, framing features that were harsh and beautiful in equal measure. But it was his eyes that caught her. Pale blue, like winter ice, burning with an intensity that made her forget to breathe. Those eyes widened slightly, his nostrils flared. And something shifted in his expression. Something that looked almost like recognition. Sarah's hands trembled. The platter slipped. It crashed to the floor with a sound that echoed through the suddenly silent hall. Bones and scraps scattered across the polished stone. Every eye turned to stare at the clumsy Omega who had dared to interrupt the king's feast. "I'm sorry," she gasped, dropping to her knees to gather the mess. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. Please, I'll clean it up. Leave it." The voice was deep, commanding, impossible to ignore. Sarah's hands froze mid-reach. "Look at me." She didn't want to. Looking at him had caused this mess. But her body obeyed before her mind could protest, and she raised her eyes to meet his. The king had risen from his seat. He was descending from the dais, moving toward her with the fluid grace of a predator. The other nobles scrambled out of his way, their faces pale with confusion and fear. Sarah stayed frozen on her knees, surrounded by the mess she'd made, as the most powerful wolf in existence stopped directly in front of her. "Stand," he said. She stood. Her legs shook beneath her. But she stood. He studied her for a long moment. His ice-blue eyes traced her features, the sharp cheekbones, the dark hair, the eyes that held far too much fear. His jaw tightened. His hands clenched at his sides. "What is your name?" he asked. Sarah, Your Majesty." Sarah. He repeated it like a prayer, like a promise. "Do you know what you are to me?" She shook her head, mute with terror. "You're my mate." The words fell like stones into still water, sending ripples through the watching crowd. "My fated, the one I have searched 500 years to find." The hall erupted in whispers. Sarah heard none of it. She was staring at the king, trying to make sense of words that couldn't possibly apply to her. "That's not possible," she breathed. "I'm an Omega. I'm nothing. I'm—" "You are everything." His voice was fierce, certain. "You are the other half of my soul, and I have waited 5 centuries to stand before you." Sarah's mind reeled. This couldn't be happening. Omegas didn't become queens. Servants didn't become mates to kings. The world didn't work that way. "I can't," she whispered. "You don't understand. I'm not meant for this. I don't know how to be what you need. I don't know how to be anything except—" "Except what?" "Except invisible." The word cracked in her throat. "I've spent my whole life learning to disappear, to take up no space, to want nothing so nothing can be taken from me." Tears burned at her eyes. "I don't know how to be a queen. I don't know how to be a mate. I don't know how to be anything that matters." The king was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, gentler. "I'm not asking you to be anything," he said. "I'm not demanding that you come with me. I'm not claiming you against your will." Sarah blinked, confused. "You're not?" "No." He reached out, slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he cupped her face in his hands, gently, so gently, like she was something precious. "I'm giving you a choice." "A choice," she repeated, the word foreign on her tongue. "Yes." His thumbs traced her cheekbones, wiping away tears she hadn't realized she'd shed. "Come with me. Let me show you the life you could have. Let me prove that you deserve more than shadows and silence." His ice blue eyes held hers. "Or stay, if that's what you truly want. If you look me in the eye and tell me you don't want this, I will walk away. It will destroy me. But I will walk away." Sarah stared at him. 500 years old. The most powerful wolf in existence. Kings didn't ask. Kings commanded. Kings took what they wanted and left destruction in their wake. But this king was giving her a choice. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you let me refuse? You could just take me. I couldn't stop you. No one could." Something flickered in his expression. Pain, maybe, or understanding. "Because I know what it's like to have no choices," he said quietly. "Because I've seen what it does to a person. Being controlled, commanded, stripped of agency. And I refuse to do that to you." His forehead touched hers, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I want you to want me, Sarah. Not because you have no other option. Not because I'm powerful and you're afraid. I want you to choose me. Freely, willingly, with your whole heart." She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process the fact that the Lycan king himself was kneeling before her. Because at some point, he had knelt, bringing himself to her level, asking for her choice instead of demanding her obedience. "I don't know what to say," she admitted. "Then don't say anything yet." He rose to his feet, releasing her face but keeping hold of her hand. "I'll be in your territory for 3 days. Take that time. Think about what you want. Not what you think you should want. Not what you've been told you deserve, but what you actually want. His grip tightened slightly. And when you have an answer, come find me. I'll be waiting. He lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. Gentle, reverent, a promise. Then he turned and walked back to his seat, leaving Sarah standing in the middle of the great hall, surrounded by the ruins of a dropped platter and the shattered remains of everything she thought she knew about how the world worked. She had a choice. For the first time in her entire life, she had a choice. Now she just had to figure out what she wanted. The next morning, Sarah woke in a bed, not her thin pallet in the servants' quarters, not the hard floor she sometimes slept on when the other Omegas took her spot. An actual bed, with soft sheets and thick blankets and pillows that smelled of lavender. She sat up in a panic, her heart racing. Where was she? How had she gotten here? The last thing she remembered was stumbling back to the kitchens after the feast, her mind spinning with everything that had happened. The door opened, and a woman entered carrying a tray of food. She was older, with kind eyes and grey-streaked hair, dressed in the fine clothes of an upper servant. "Good morning, my lady," the woman said, setting the tray on a small table by the window. "The king requested you be moved to proper quarters. I'm Helena. I'll be attending you during his stay." "My lady?" Sarah almost laughed at the absurdity of it. "I'm not a lady. I'm a kitchen servant." "You're the king's mate." Helena's voice was matter of fact. "That makes you the highest-ranking woman in any territory you enter." Sarah's stomach churned. "I haven't said yes." "I know." Helena moved to the wardrobe and began pulling out dresses, actual dresses, in colours Sarah had never worn. The king was very clear. You're to be given every comfort, but you're not to be pressured. Your choice remains your own. Your choice. There were those words again. "I don't understand him," Sarah admitted. Helena paused, turning to look at her with an expression that was almost gentle. "The king is not like other men. He's seen too much, lived too long. He knows that some things cannot be forced." She laid a blue dress across the foot of the bed. "Eat, bathe, take your time. He'll wait." And he did wait. For the entire first day, Sarah didn't see him. She wandered the halls of the manor house in her borrowed dress, half expecting someone to stop her, to demand she return to the kitchens where she belonged. No one did. The servants who had once ordered her around now bowed their heads when she passed. It was disorienting, unsettling, like wearing someone else's skin. She found herself in the gardens by midday, sitting on a stone bench beneath an ancient oak tree. The autumn air was crisp, the leaves just beginning to turn. It was beautiful. She'd never had time to notice beauty before. "You look lost." Sarah startled. The king stood at the edge of the garden, watching her with those piercing blue eyes. He was dressed simply today, dark trousers, a white shirt, no crown or royal regalia. He looked almost ordinary, almost approachable. Almost. "I don't know what to do with myself," she admitted. "I've never had a day without work, without orders." "That must be strange." "It's terrifying." The honesty surprised her. She hadn't meant to say that out loud. The king moved closer, slowly, like he was approaching a wild animal that might bolt. "May I sit?" She nodded, and he lowered himself onto the bench beside her, not too close, leaving space between them, giving her room. "Tell me something about yourself," he said. Sarah blinked. "What?" "Anything. Something you've never told anyone." His eyes were steady on hers. I want to know who you are, Sarah, not what you can do for me. Who you are. No one had ever asked her that before. No one had ever cared enough to wonder. I used to dream about the ocean, she heard herself say. When I was little, before my parents died. They told me stories about it. How big it was, how it stretched on forever. I've never seen it, but I dream about it sometimes. Standing on the shore, feeling the waves on my feet. She looked down at her hands, embarrassed. It's stupid. It's not stupid. His voice was quiet. It's beautiful. You've seen the ocean. Many times. My kingdom sits on the northern coast. He paused. If you come with me, I'll take you there, as many times as you want. The offer hung in the air between them, a glimpse of what her life could be. Not endless labor and cold floors and the ache of never belonging, but oceans, beauty. Someone who asked her questions and actually listened to the answers. Why are you being so patient? She asked. You're the king. You could have anyone. I don't want anyone. I want you. But why? He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rougher, more vulnerable than she'd heard it before. When I was young, younger than you even, I was not always the king. I was a prince in a kingdom that no longer exists. And I watched my father force my mother into a bond she didn't want. Watched her wither under the weight of choices that were never given to her. His jaw tightened. She died when I was 15. Not from violence, from despair, from being trapped in a life she never chose. Sarah's breath caught. I swore then that I would never do that to anyone. His eyes met hers, and she saw centuries of pain in their depths. I have waited 500 years for you, Sarah. I can wait a few more days, a few more weeks, a few more years, if that's what you need. Because when you come to me, if you come to me, I want it to be because you want to be there, not because you felt you had no other option. She didn't know what to say, didn't know how to process this ancient, powerful king laying his heart bare before her like an offering. I'm scared, she whispered. I know. I don't know if I can be what you need. You already are. He reached out, slowly, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The touch was feather-light, there and gone. You just don't see it yet. They sat in silence for a while, watching the leaves drift down from the oak tree. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was peaceful. Something Sarah hadn't felt in years. Tell me something about you, she finally said. Something you've never told anyone. He smiled, small, surprised, like she'd given him a gift. I collect pressed flowers. I have hundreds of them from every territory I've ever visited. It's a foolish hobby for a king. It's not foolish. It's... She searched for the word. Gentle. Gentle. He repeated it like he was testing the taste. I don't think anyone has ever called me that before. Maybe they don't see you clearly. His eyes met hers, and something passed between them. Something warm and fragile and terrifying. Perhaps they don't, he agreed softly. That night, alone in her borrowed room, Sarah lay awake and thought about choices. She'd spent her whole life being told what to do, where to go, who to be. The idea of choosing her own path was foreign, almost incomprehensible. She didn't know how to want things, didn't know how to reach for something without expecting it to be snatched away. But when she closed her eyes, she saw ice-blue eyes and a smile that softened harsh features. She felt the ghost of a touch on her cheek. She heard a deep voice saying, "I can wait." Something was shifting inside her, something small and fragile and new. She wasn't ready to call it hope, not yet, but she was starting to think that maybe, just maybe, she wanted to find out what it could become. On the second day, Sarah found the king in the library. She hadn't been looking for him, or at least that's what she told herself. She'd simply been exploring, trying to fill the strange emptiness of a day without labor. The manor house had rooms she'd never seen before, despite years of service. Rooms that had always been off-limits to someone like her. The library was one of them. It was smaller than she'd expected, cozy rather than grand, with worn leather chairs and shelves that reached the ceiling. A fire crackled in the hearth. And there, in the chair closest to the flames, sat the king. He had a book open in his lap, but he wasn't reading. He was staring into the fire, his expression distant, almost sad. "Your Majesty." The words escaped before she could stop them. He looked up, and for a moment, she saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. Loneliness, bone deep and ancient, the kind that came from centuries of being surrounded by people who feared him rather than knew him. Then he blinked, and it was gone. Sarah. Her name in his voice still did strange things to her chest. "Please come in." She hesitated in the doorway. "I didn't mean to intrude. I was just—" "You're not intruding." He gestured to the chair across from him. "I could use the company. 500 years of living, and I've discovered that libraries are lonelier than they should be." She crossed the room and settled into the chair he'd indicated. The leather was soft, warm from the fire. She could feel his eyes on her, patient and steady. "What were you reading?" she asked. "Poetry." He held up the book, a slim volume, well worn from use. "It's foolish. A king reading love poems by the fire like a heartbroken youth." "Is it about your mother?" The question surprised them both. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have—" "No." His voice was quiet, but not angry. "It's all right. You're the first person in centuries who's asked me anything real." He looked down at the book in his hands. "Yes, it's about her. About loss. About loving someone who was never allowed to love you back." Sarah's heart ached. She thought of her own mother, dim memories now, softened by time, and the way she used to sing while braiding Sarah's hair, before the illness took her, before everything fell apart. "I lost my parents when I was 7, she said. She didn't know why she was telling him this, didn't know why his pain made her want to share her own. "I barely remember them. Sometimes I worry I've made up the good memories, that they weren't actually as kind as I remember, that I've invented a fantasy, because the truth was too painful." The king was quiet for a moment. Then he leaned forward, his ice blue eyes intent on hers. "The memories you carry of being loved, even if they're imperfect, even if they've been softened by time, they're real. They matter." His voice was low, fierce. "Someone loved you, Sarah. Someone saw you as precious before the world taught you to see yourself as worthless. Hold on to that." Tears burned at her eyes. She blinked them back, but one escaped anyway, trailing down her cheek. He reached out, slowly, always slowly, always giving her time to pull away, and brushed the tear from her skin with his thumb. "You're not worthless," he said. "You have never been worthless. The people who treated you that way were blind. They couldn't see what was right in front of them." "What do you see?" The question came out as a whisper. "I see strength." His hand lingered on her cheek, warm and gentle. I see someone who survived everything the world threw at her and didn't let it make her cruel. I see kindness that persists despite every reason to abandon it. His voice dropped. I see my mate, the other half of my soul, the woman I would wait another 500 years for, if that's what it took. Sarah couldn't breathe, couldn't think. His hand was still on her face, and his eyes held hers, and she felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff with nothing but air beneath her. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. I don't know how to be loved. I don't know how to accept kindness without waiting for the catch. There is no catch. There's always a catch. There's always something people want. Nothing is ever free. This is. He shifted closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. I want nothing from you except whatever you're willing to give. If that's conversation by the fire, I'll take it gratefully. If that's silence in the garden, I'll cherish it. If it's your hand in mine as we walk the halls, I'll hold it like the treasure it is. And if I say no? Her voice cracked. If I decide I can't do this, that I'm too broken, too scared, and I walk away? Pain flickered across his features, real, raw pain that he made no effort to hide. Then I will let you go. The words sounded like they cost him something vital. I will spend the rest of my life missing you, but I will let you go, because your freedom matters more to me than my happiness. She stared at him. This ancient king, this powerful ruler who could have anything he wanted with a word, was telling her that her choice mattered more than his own heart. Something cracked inside her. Some wall she'd built so long ago, she'd forgotten it existed. I want to believe you, she whispered. Then believe me. His forehead touched hers, and she could feel his breath on her lips. I have no reason to lie to you, Sarah. I have waited 5 centuries for this moment. I would never jeopardize it with falsehood. They stayed like that for a long moment, foreheads touching, breath mingling, the fire crackling softly beside them. Sarah's heart was racing. Every instinct screamed at her to pull away, to protect herself, to retreat behind the walls that had kept her safe for so long. But another part of her, a small, tentative part that was learning to hope again, wanted to stay exactly where she was. Kaelan, she breathed. He went still. She realized, belatedly, that she'd used his name. Not Your Majesty, not the king. His actual name, the one she'd heard whispered among the servants. Say it again, he murmured. Kaelan. He made a sound, low, almost pained, and his hand slid from her cheek to cup the back of her neck. His thumb traced the sensitive skin behind her ear. I want to kiss you, he said, his voice rough. I have wanted to kiss you since the moment I saw you in that hall, but I won't. Not until you choose this. Not until you're certain. I'm not certain of anything. Then we wait. He pulled back slightly, putting distance between them, even though she could see how much it cost him. Tomorrow is the 3rd day, my last day here, and whatever you decide, Sarah, I will honor it. He stood, setting the book of poetry aside, and crossed to the door, but before he left, he turned back. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I think you're braver than you know. Most people spend their whole lives never questioning the cages they were put in. You're standing at the open door, trying to decide if you're brave enough to fly. He was gone before she could respond. Sarah sat alone in the library, the fire slowly dying, her mind spinning with everything that had happened. She touched her cheek where his hand had been. She could still feel the warmth of his forehead against hers, could still hear his voice saying, "Your freedom matters more to me than my happiness." She was falling for him. She could feel it happening, like stepping off solid ground into open air. Terrifying, exhilarating, inevitable. Tomorrow was the third day. Tomorrow, she would have to choose. And for the first time in her life, Sarah realized she knew what she wanted. She just had to find the courage to reach for it. On the morning of the third day, Sarah woke to chaos. Shouts echoed through the manor. Footsteps pounded past her door. She scrambled out of bed, pulling on the simplest dress she could find, and stepped into the hallway to find servants rushing in every direction. "What's happening?" she asked Helena, who was hurrying past with an armful of linens. "The king is leaving." Helena's voice was tight. Earlier than planned. Something about urgent business in the north. Sarah's heart stopped. "Leaving?" But he said, "He's in the courtyard now. His men are already mounted." Helena paused, her expression softening with something like sympathy. "If you want to catch him, you'd better run." Sarah ran. She flew down the stairs, through the great hall, past servants who stared and nobles who whispered. Her borrowed slippers skidded on the polished floors, but she didn't slow down. Couldn't slow down. She burst through the main doors into the courtyard and stopped dead. Kalen stood beside an enormous black horse, dressed in travelling clothes, his dark hair pulled back from his face. His commanders surrounded him, already mounted, ready to ride. His hand was on the horse's neck, and he was saying something to one of his men. Then his eyes found her. The courtyard went silent. Every soldier, every servant, every noble who had gathered to see the king off. They all turned to stare at the Omega in her rumpled dress, breathing hard, standing on the steps like she'd run through fire to get there. Kalen's expression was unreadable. He released the horse and took a step toward her. "Sira, you're leaving." The words came out sharper than she intended. "You said 3 days. You said you'd wait." "I received word this morning. There's trouble in the north, a border dispute that requires my attention." His voice was calm, measured, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. "I cannot stay." "So you were just going to go? Without saying goodbye? Without—" "I was going to come find you." He took another step closer. "To tell you that my offer still stands, that if you need more time, I will wait, that you can send word when you're ready, and I will come for you, no matter how long it takes." She stared at him. He was still giving her a choice. Even now, with his kingdom calling him away, he was still putting her freedom first. "And if I'm ready now?" The words hung in the air between them. Behind her, she heard gasps, whispers, the scandal of an Omega addressing a king so boldly. She didn't care. Kalen went very still. "What did you say?" "I said I'm ready." Her voice shook, but she didn't stop. Couldn't stop now that she'd started. "I've spent 3 days thinking about what I want. What I actually want, not what I think I should want or what I've been told I deserve. And I know." "Tell me." "I want to see the ocean." The tears started then, streaming down her face, but she kept talking. "I want to learn what it feels like to be loved. I want to stop being invisible. I want to matter to someone." Her voice cracked. "I want you, Kalen. I choose you. I choose this life, even though it terrifies me, even though I don't know how to do it, even though dash dash." She didn't get to finish. He crossed the remaining distance between them in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. His mouth found hers, and the world disappeared. The kiss was everything she'd been afraid of, and everything she'd secretly wanted. Fierce and tender, desperate and patient. 500 years of loneliness meeting 20 years of invisibility, crashing together like waves against the shore. She felt the bond snap into place, a golden thread connecting her heart to his, filling her with warmth and certainty and belonging. She felt his emotions flood through her. Relief, joy, desire, and underneath it all, a love so deep it made her knees weak. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard. His forehead rested against hers, his hands cradling her face like she was made of glass. "Say it again," he breathed. "I choose you." He made a sound, half laugh, half sob, and kissed her again. Softer this time, a promise rather than a claim. "Your Majesty." One of his commanders cleared his throat. "The border situation can wait." Kalen didn't take his eyes off Sarah. "Send word that I'll be delayed. My mate and I have a bonding ceremony to arrange." The courtyard erupted in noise, gasps and whispers, and the shuffling of soldiers uncertain what to do. Sira barely heard any of it. She was too focused on the man holding her, on the bond pulsing between them, on the terrifying, exhilarating realization that she had actually done it. She had chosen. "The Alpha won't be happy," she said quietly, "losing an Omega servant to a king. The Alpha will accept my generous compensation for your departure." Kalen's eyes darkened. "And if he doesn't, he'll learn very quickly why it's unwise to displease me." "You don't have to threaten people on my behalf." "Yes, I do." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "You're mine now, Sarah. Anyone who has ever hurt you, anyone who has ever made you feel worthless, they will answer for it. Not with violence, if I can help it. But they will know that the woman they dismissed is now the most protected person in my kingdom." She should have been frightened by the intensity in his voice. Instead, she felt safe, cherished, seen. "I don't know how to be a queen," she admitted. "You'll learn. I'll teach you." "I don't know how to be a mate." "Neither do I." He smiled then, real, unguarded, beautiful. "We'll figure it out together." He took her hand and turned to face the assembled crowd. Soldiers, servants, nobles. They all stared at the Omega who had somehow captured their king. "This woman is my fated mate," Kalen announced, his voice carrying across the courtyard. "She will return with me to the north. She will be crowned as my queen. And anyone who treats her with anything less than the respect she deserves will answer to me personally." He looked down at her, his ice blue eyes warm in ways she'd never expected. "Are you ready?" Sarah thought about the choice she'd just made, about the life stretching out before her, unknown, intimidating, full of challenges she couldn't begin to imagine, but also full of oceans, poetry by the fire, a king who collected pressed flowers and waited 5 centuries just to give her the option to say no. "Yes," she said, "I'm ready." He lifted her onto his horse and swung up behind her, his arms encircling her waist. The soldiers fell into formation around them, and as they rode out of the courtyard, leaving behind the manor house and the kitchens and the storage closet where she used to sleep, Sarah felt something she'd never felt before. Freedom. Not the freedom of being alone, the freedom of being chosen, the freedom of finally mattering to someone. She leaned back against Kalen's chest, feeling his heartbeat against her spine, feeling the bond humming between them like a song. She had been given a choice, and for the first time in her life, she had chosen right. 1 year later, Queen Sarah stood on the northern shore and let the waves wash over her feet. The water was cold, far colder than she'd imagined, but she didn't mind. She'd dreamed of this moment since she was a child, and the reality was better than any fantasy. The ocean stretched before her, endless and wild, crashing against the rocks with a power that took her breath away. "You're going to catch cold." Kaelin's voice came from behind her, warm with amusement. She turned to find him watching from the beach, his dark hair loose around his shoulders, his ice-blue eyes soft in ways they never were for anyone but her. "I don't care." She spread her arms wide, tilting her face toward the spray. "It's beautiful." "Yes." But when she looked at him, he wasn't watching the ocean. He was watching her. "It is." A year of marriage, and he still looked at her like that, like she was the most precious thing in his world, like he couldn't quite believe she was real. She felt the same way about him. The past 12 months had been a whirlwind, a coronation that made her officially queen. Lessons in diplomacy, etiquette, and the 1,000 small skills required to rule a kingdom. Nights spent in Kaelin's arms, learning what it meant to be loved without reservation. Days spent discovering that she had a voice, and that people actually wanted to hear it. She wasn't invisible anymore. She would never be invisible again. "We should head back," Kaelin said, crossing the sand to join her at the water's edge. "The delegation from Blackwood arrives this afternoon." Sarah's stomach tightened. Blackwood. The pack that had owned her for 15 years. The pack whose alpha had worked her to exhaustion and dismissed her as worthless. They were coming here, to her kingdom, to kneel before her throne. "Are you ready for this?" Kaelin asked, his hand finding hers. "No." She laced her fingers through his, drawing strength from his touch. "But I'm going to do it anyway." The great hall of the northern castle was nothing like the manor house where Sarah had once scrubbed floors. It was vast and ancient, carved from the mountain itself, with windows that overlooked the sea. Tapestries bearing the royal crest hung from every wall, and at the far end, on a dais of polished stone, sat 2 thrones. Sarah took her place beside her husband, her crown heavy on her head, her heart pounding in her chest. She'd worn her finest gown for this occasion, deep blue silk embroidered with silver, the colours of the Northern Kingdom, the colours of her kingdom now. The doors opened. The Blackwood delegation entered. Alpha Vaughan led the procession, his wife and advisers trailing behind him. Sarah recognized them all, the people who had looked through her for 15 years, who had assigned her the worst tasks and given her the smallest portions, who had treated her like furniture that occasionally needed to be disciplined. They walked the length of the great hall with their heads high, clearly expecting to be received with the respect due to visiting dignitaries. Then they reached the thrones, and Sarah watched their faces as recognition dawned. Alpha Vaughan's eyes went wide. His wife's mouth fell open. The advisers stumbled to a halt, staring at the woman who sat beside the Lycan king, the woman who had once been their property. "Welcome to the Northern Kingdom," Kaelin said, his voice carrying the edge of ice that made lesser wolves tremble. "I believe you know my queen." The silence stretched. Sarah could see the calculations happening behind Alpha Vaughan's eyes, the horror, the disbelief, the dawning realization of just how badly he had miscalculated. "Your Majesties." His voice came out strangled as he dropped into a bow. The rest of the delegation followed, sinking to their knees with varying degrees of reluctance. "We are honored." "Are you?" Sarah was surprised by how steady her voice sounded, how strong. I seem to recall a time when my presence was anything but an honor, when I was told to keep my head down and my mouth shut, when I was given the coldest room and the smallest meals and punished for the slightest mistake. Alpha Vaughan's face went pale. Your Majesty, I'm not finished. She rose from her throne, descending the dais with a grace she'd spent a year perfecting. I remember every moment of those 15 years, Alpha Vaughan. Every floor I scrubbed, every meal I missed, every time I was reminded that I was nothing, that I was worthless, that I should be grateful for even the scraps I received. The hall was utterly silent. Every noble, every guard, every servant. They all watched as their queen faced the man who had once controlled her life. Do you know what kept me alive during those years? Sierra stopped directly in front of him, close enough to see the sweat beading on his forehead. Hope. A tiny, stubborn spark of hope that refused to die, no matter how hard you tried to extinguish it. Hope that someday, somehow, things would be different. She looked down at the man kneeling before her, this alpha who had seemed so powerful, so untouchable, when she was just a servant in his household. He looked very small now. I could destroy you, she said quietly. The king would support whatever punishment I chose. Your pack would fall. Your family would suffer. And part of me, the part that remembers every cold night and every cruel word, wants that. Alpha Vaughan's face crumpled with fear. But I'm not going to. Sierra straightened, squaring her shoulders. Because revenge would make me like you. And I refuse to let the people who hurt me turn me into someone I don't want to be. She turned away, climbing back to her throne, settling beside her husband. Your trade agreements will be renewed, she announced. Your pack will continue to receive the protection of the crown. But you will remember this moment, Alpha Vaughan. Every time you look at an Omega in your pack, every time you're tempted to dismiss someone as worthless, you will remember that the servant you discarded became the queen who showed you mercy. She met his eyes one final time. You may go. The delegation retreated, stumbling over themselves in their haste to leave. Sierra watched them go, feeling something loosen in her chest, some weight she'd been carrying for 15 years, finally lifting. Kaelin's hand found hers on the armrest of her throne. That, he murmured, was magnificent. That was terrifying. She let out a shaky breath. I thought I was going to faint. You didn't look it. You looked like a queen. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. I am so proud of you. That night, in their chambers overlooking the sea, Sarah stood at the window and watched the moonlight dance on the waves. Kaelin came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, his chin resting on top of her head. What are you thinking about? That day in the great hall, when you gave me a choice. She leaned back against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. I was so scared. I didn't know how to want things, didn't know how to believe that someone like you could actually want someone like me. And now? Now I know. She turned in his arms, looking up at the man who had waited 5 centuries just to give her the option to say no. I know that I'm not invisible. I know that I matter. I know that I am loved. Her hand cupped his face. And I know that choosing you was the best decision I ever made. His ice blue eyes glowed in the moonlight. I love you, Sarah. I have loved you since the moment I saw you in that hall, and I will love you for the next 500 years and beyond. I love you too. The words came easily now, without fear, without hesitation. Thank you for giving me a choice. Thank you for waiting. Thank you for seeing me when no one else did. He kissed her, slow and deep, full of promise and forever. When they finally broke apart, Sarah smiled, a real smile, the kind that had been buried for 15 years and was only now learning to bloom. She had been given a choice, the first choice of her entire life, and she had chosen love, chosen hope, chosen a future she never dared to dream of. She had chosen right. Thank you so much for listening to this story. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Drop a comment and let me know. What was your favorite part? I'd love to hear from you. And remember, you always have a choice. Even when the world tells you otherwise,